What's up, EyeMyth? Can you hear me?
Yes, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Oh, you have a wonderful voice. I always worry when like a random person is like, oh, I want to talk on camera, that they're going to be like, because you never know.
Hey, Scott, I really appreciate you letting me come onto your stream. It's a very nice thing to do. I'm a random person, and that's not an easy thing to do. And I do want to say I do appreciate your time in
dude,
organizing this and letting me on. It's cool. It's a cool thing, man.
Yeah, I mean, not to say that I'm starving for content or anything, but it's also not like I'm swamped, you know.
Yeah.
But also, I think I don't think you get to build a community. A lot of other streamers, I think they're in the Twitch politics community, right? And we're not really in the Twitch politics community, even though I'm interacting with them all the time, really kind of building our own thing here, because our political values don't really align with the overwhelming majority of the market share of the Twitch politics audience. So like, I have no problem bringing people on. I want to build you know what I mean? Like if we build a community that's much smaller than everybody else, that's more dedicated and watches more often, like why would that bother me, right?
Hey, Scott, do you mind if I can share my screen? I need to quit Discord real quick though. Let me come right back in and I can share my screen with you.
Yeah, sure.
I know I don't share my screen, but let me do this real quick.
All right, yeah, fine. Not gonna lie, some of the dumbest asinine takes I've seen / heard are from people who consistently brag about their high IQ. They're legit dumb, elitist, and unjustifiably smug. Just the worst combination. Yeah, but I would argue that, people can claim whatever IQ they want, right? But I would argue that what's really occurring, if they are high IQ, is there are two things that make people sound dumb, right? Which is ideological possession, where they're really closed-minded unless they're able to fit something through the frame of their belief system, which could be, tradcon conservative, religious conservatives, or like Marxists. It could be any, that doesn't belong to the left or the right. And then the second would be kind of like what I said, which is like, not being very wise. Plenty of people do things that I guess you could call dumb, or in vice versa, the antithetical, smart, based off of what is a wise decision. And, I would say that conservatives probably lean towards being more wise than the left. But I would also say that the left tends to be more open, like just definitionally is more open-minded. And so they're less resistant to change even if that change is going to be a positive thing, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? So I think there's a lot of strengths and weaknesses to left-minded, right-minded thinking people.
That's a weird way of thinking things sometimes. I don't think of myself as being left or right necessarily. I would consider myself a philosopher. I care about critical thinking, and I would say I'm a very political person, and I care about how resources are deployed. But left and right to me just seems like some sort of game sport, some team sport that I'm not oftentimes not interested in. I do care about people like yourself.
Well, it's like racism. It's like anything, right? There's a certain utility towards being able to have a meta conversation about a group of people, right? And then there's a certain utility towards doing a more in-depth analysis where some of those categories begin to fall away. But I think both are necessary, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like if snakes are venomous and you can't tell the difference between snakes, then maybe it's a good idea to say that all snakes are venomous, right? Or that they all have the potential to be venomous, or these things tend to be dangerous, right? But then if you're looking at a copperhead versus an emerald boa constrictor, then all of a sudden, like this idea of like whether or not they're venomous, or like the category of snakes, becomes less important. And what becomes important is the size of the head, whether or not it actually is venomous, what its color is, right? As you individualize the information. So I agree that people maybe obsess too much with the categories, but I think the categories are important to have a conversation that's meaningful. Otherwise we're kind of just in a void of like unable to talk about things we kind of all recognize.
Yeah, I think the thing about that is that I don't want to put it on people that, like, snakes are venomous, and I don't want to put it on, like, conservatives that, they hate families, or, they don't, they hate certain types of people. I don't want to put that on people. And I think that oftentimes that kind of language gets lumped around, leftist hate, America, leftist hate, blah, blah, blah. And that kind of stuff seems like very, it seems like if I was an evil mastermind, I'd be doing that to have like working class people not unify on some issues that really matter to them. And, that's the kind of the dangers we run in with that kind of like generalization, that kind of reductionism, in my opinion.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
seems like the case now.
I mean, like, sure, for sure, but it's, I don't know, like all things, once the ideas escape like the individual spouting them and go into like a larger conversation, a larger audience, there's dangers of any type of statement or idea changing into something else or being problematic in some way. You know what I mean? Like, but that doesn't necessarily mean the idea of per se left or right is inherently wrong or lacks utility, right? It just means that in, let's say, a certain political charged environment, those conversations tend to become, create cannon fodder or problems,
Do you always talk about utility a lot? Is that like, do you think like most people that talk in politics think in that kind of paradigm and that kind of modality,
I would say so. I would say the overwhelming majority of people in politics are coming from a consequentialist framework. I find it very more often, which I mean, like, as humans, right? You want to rationally look at, like, there's nothing wrong with consequential, like utility as a form of analysis if there's a goal that you have, right? And then trying to rationally attain that goal. The only problem with consequentialism is when you try and make determine morality that way. And I think that it falls, worse than falling short. I think it's anti-moral. I think it is anti-truth. I think it is specifically against morality to be a consequentialist in the way that you analyze morals.
And why is that specifically? Why is that the case?
Because I think consequentialism requires perfect knowledge, and without that, it's subject to using your subjective bias on what information you choose to look at, what your order rankings are of that information, and then of course all of the information you're lacking. Those things lead to a situation where it can be used to do things that are coincidentally good, but I think more often than not, what it does is it takes whatever our emotions are and then becomes a post hoc rationalization for moralizing whatever our emotional, whatever it is we feel is right.
Yeah, Scott, I think what they call that fableism, when you have problems with how much information we can ever know about the world, and there's always going to be some levels of error. I think that, there's ways around that though, right? I think there's some things in our lives that are, significant, like major policies that, distribute resources. And there's some things that are insignificant, me going down to the store despite the traffic. I don't know, something insignificant. Who cares, right? And I think when it comes to those significant, like big policy matters where the public's involved, it seems like we should. There's ways around that. We can gather as much information as possible, right? There's a lot of different ways we can use, like, have strong arguments, maybe not logically like sound ones, but like we can use as much data that we have like as possible. Like strong arguments are necessary, and I think when it comes to like significant policies, that's what we should be doing. There should be like a moral obligation to know as much about this situation as possible, to check our cognitive biases. Right?
Oh, for sure. I agree with all that. What I'm saying is there's a distinction. There's a distinction in my mind, right, between the morality of something, right, and then the process of gathering information to achieve a goal, right? And when you use consequentialism to determine whether or not something is right or wrong to do, that is inherently anti-human, in my opinion. Now, when you use it to determine, when you're using like information and data and empiricism to try and discover, the closest ways for, like, what are the rational outcomes of said thing, and how do we want to move in terms of tactics or making something, whatever it is that our goal is, right? To boost the economy or whatever, you know what I mean? Or to increase trade, whatever those things are, that's perfectly fine. My question is, my thing is that I am mostly I'm an ANCAP, right? So if something I don't find to be morally justifiable, which is aggression or theft, no amount of consequentialist framework can convince me that a morally unjustifiable position is morally justifiable.
Do you think about distinction between like morality and ethics? Do you think about that distinction?
What do you mean? Do I think about it? Sure, I think about it.
I hear you talk, Scott. I mean, I normally hear morality, and there's not many people that actually talk about ethics. And I was just wondering if that's something that you're doing on purpose, or maybe you're just not thinking about ethics necessarily.
Well, no. So I'm talking about ethics here. But the
actually,
problem,
one thing is
morality. The reason I use morality is because the biggest misconception of anarcho-capitalist and libertarian philosophy is that people do not separate prescriptive and descriptive things. And so it's really easy when a libertarian says this should be legal, that people don't understand that they're not making a moral claim about whether or not something should be, they're not making a moral claim about the action itself being a moral good, right? What they're saying is that it is ethically unjustifiable to make said thing illegal. And so I maybe I lean a little too heavily if I'm talking to someone that kind of understands the framework a little better. But in terms of attempting to communicate these things, I've made it a habit to use the word moral often and morally unjustifiable and things like that, so that people can have a better concept of the distinction between those two things.
Yeah, if we're going back to consequentialism and then talking about ethics, I kind of identify like a major like aspects of ethics is that you're able to have a hierarchy of like a priority list, you can this is the most important, this is the this is not as important, right? And then also ethics can determine kind of like the magnitude, like how far do we go with this priority, and I think consequentialism, that ability to set priorities and to set like magnitudes is kind of hidden. There might be, it's like, why did you do that? Why did you set, I don't know, you name it, whatever in the topic of the day, but why did you set identity politics at the top? Why did you do that? Or like conservatives, why did you set immigration at top? It seems like I question the transparency.
I don't think that's a question
that
of
decision
ethics.
making.
Because
yeah,
I don't think consequentialism is a legitimate form of normative ethics.
I would say
I don't think it belongs there because it can't answer questions ethically.
I'm agreeing with you, Scott. I am.
It can analyze higher ordered values, right? And then it attempts to weasel its way into making moral claims about those things or ethical claims. I don't think it makes ethical claims. What I think it does is it makes subjective claims. And then just tries to stamp morality on it. And it's a lot of sophistry to try and get to a position of that. And I don't think those questions that it does answer are ethical questions. I think they're questions of what are your values and what values are more important to you and how do you interact with the world to achieve your values. That's just rationality.
Well, generally, like a lot of things, you need to have theory first before you have good rationality. Rationality requires, there's kind of things like prerequisites, like rationality and the type that I know you to have requires you to have good definitions of things and for it to be accurate, right? Because you don't necessarily require, observing the world. You require good definitions of your terms. The reason I'd want to talk today is because I don't think you actually have good definitions when it comes to abortion. Specifically, that's why I wanted to talk to you. And
you wanted to talk about evictionism,
right? Did you watch the video with
Dr. Walter Block?
No, but I did read up on some evictionism, and I did listen to you. So
I was just saying,
I did.
If you go to our YouTube, you can see the guy who invented evictionism, Dr. Walter Block. I interviewed him about evictionism. which I was just curious if you like watched that in terms of preparation for this or whatever, because he's probably better at explaining it than I am.
Yeah, I did some. I listened to you, but that I'm not. I'm not.
No, it's fine.
I didn't want to talk to Block. I wanted to talk to you, Scott. No, I wanted to talk to you casually, Scott. I didn't want to talk to Walter Block about evictionism. But in general, I think there's some problems of definitions. I think they're actually important when we talk about abortion, and I would just like to pass up
where
to you.
Where are you coming from? Like you said that you want to strengthen my definitions, so it seems that you want to strengthen my argument, or do you think that my argument is wrong because of a definition that's missing or something?
Right. Well, as far as you're concerned, I think the best. I'm worried that the definition you're like. Actually, tell me your definition of of a baby, I guess. Right. I mean, of a fetus. You think that they're the idea of an unborn child is really confusing to me. It's being used in legal terms, but it seems if we accept, DNA. But if you accept that humans go through stages of development, a child definitely seems to be born, and saying an unborn child definitely seems like a marketing ploy. It's not. It's bad linguistics. It's not.
I don't think
it's
so.
It's logically inconsistent. If you think what a baby is, right, and you think what how it exists in human development, I think the best way to define baby is one anchored in medical imaging, linguistics, and sociology. I think that's the best way to anchor an accurate description of what a baby is and a fetus.
So when I say baby or child, right, I am talking somewhat colloquially, right? Like if I'm on a panel with a bunch of other people, right? Now, what I would say is that distinct human DNA, that is its own life form, identifiable life form, which would be the moment of conception, or one might possibly argue like once there's a zygote, right? Is deserving of the rights of personhood. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think I would challenge that. I would say that, human being, you can't be a human being without a human body. I would say that human beings are also real. We're not fictional. We're not exist in some future state. We can be observed now. I'm basing that in, anatomy and physiology, in medical imaging, and the way we use language, right? That's what I'm basing that definition on. So as a life form, we can go look at biology and see what they mean by that, right? We look at, there's certain, basically the main, I don't want to get like too technical. I don't think it's good. I want to be kind of like on point here. Just be real quick about this, basically, right? So there's different like aspects of what a life is, right? And having DNA is just one of them. Having a human body, the main purpose of that is that we can, fight off death, fight atrophy. Right? Entropy, excuse me. Unless you have that body, you can't be a human being. You can't live any type of life.
So I would disagree. And here's why, right? Like I would say that a woman, for example, that's infertile is still a woman. She belongs in the cluster of woman, right? I wouldn't say that she's somehow not a woman because she's infertile and can't have children. And in the same regard, I would say that distinct identifiable human DNA of a specific life form does have a body. That body may not be developed in terms of limbs. It may not have a primal streak yet, but it falls within the category of humans that have the rights of personhood. And so I wouldn't deny, the same way that I wouldn't deny someone that's intellectually disabled their rights of personhood, or I wouldn't deny that a woman that can't get pregnant because she's infertile is somehow not a woman. I also wouldn't deny that a fetus or a zygote is somehow not human because it hasn't cooked long enough to become, to develop our idea of a body. Just like I wouldn't say that, an Iraq war veteran that had his legs blown off is somehow missing a principal element that makes him no longer a human, or that he should have his rights of personhood denied. So I think they all fall within the cluster of what is a human, and humans deserve the right of personhood.
I think, you put the cart before the horse right now. I would say the idea that any veteran already has a body. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about a woman. A body's already been established. You just said, I mean, basically your metaphors were just saying I know you want to give a fetus personhood status. And I'm saying that doesn't make sense. It's a bad definition. You're using metaphors that aren't relevant. You're talking about things that are already established as human beings.
I'm not. No,
it's kind
I'm
of.
not.
I'm sorry. Let me finish my thought because I want to get my metaphor. I want to get my metaphor.
Distinction. You're making a distinction, right? That says that because this, I mean, it fits every definition of the metaphors that I made. And you're saying, well, no, the difference is that it hasn't come to consciousness yet. Because your original definition
doesn't have a human body, actually.
Right. So
consciousness
now
doesn't necessarily.
I gave you a ton of metaphors that show that the body thing is problematic, and that your definition there of lacking a human body that is fully developed is not appropriate. And I gave you a ton of metaphors of people that could potentially be born with or have pieces removed that are lacking portions of what is considered a typical body. And those people still have personhood. Right.
But what you did is you already assigned those people human, but they just have modifiers on them, like a malformed person, a human, right? A human that's missing parts, a human that doesn't have isn't pregnant. I mean, you've already assigned human status to them. They already have a body. They just might be damaged or hurt. That's how life.
Crazy.
That's how life.
But
goes,
if I walk outside and I see humans, I identify those as humans, right? Just the same way. Yes, I said that a human that distinctly identifiable human DNA of a life form that is at least a zygote is a human. Your response is, well, they don't have a body, and a human requires a body. So then I gave you examples of individuals that are missing parts of their bodies or potentially may have been born without them. Some women, for example, are born without ovaries, right? And so then you said, well, that doesn't count. And it's like, you tell me what it is that makes a human distinct. You say it's a body. And then I challenge that and you go, well, you can't challenge that because reasons.
Let me explain, Scott. I think.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll shut up.
Because I don't think you really.
I gotta nail you on it, but then I'll let you.
No, we're an organism. We're a complex organism that has many different systems that work together. Mm-hmm. That its main function is to keep us from decaying. That's what bodies do. And in order to do that, there has to be a lot of different systems in place that work together to make that happen. An arm is not one of those. But if I said that, if you didn't have it, if a person went to war and they lost their head, they would be a dead human. But what would you call a person? You wouldn't call it a person if you never had a head. You don't get, if you never had any type of thing that would allow you to, in the first place, like you never had a head, what would that be? You never had it.
Well, you'd be dead.
You wouldn't even be a person yet, though. If you never had any of those, if you never had any systems, if you never had any of the things that a human would need to, not decay, like anything.
Okay, so
right?
do children born to Jewish children, right, who have Tay-Sachs disease that die at around 4 years old because their own body deteriorates. If they're 3 and they've yet to succumb to Tay-Sachs disease, are they not deserving of rights? Should we just be able to rape them whenever we want because they're not really humans because their body deteriorated and they didn't develop properly?
That's crazy. I dismiss that whole concept. That's disgusting. I don't know what you're doing. I'm talking about,
I'm pointing out that your
fetuses,
argument is flawed.
I'm talking about fetuses. Well, I'm talking about fetuses in human bodies, and you're talking about children being abused. That's gross. So, we're talking about
fetuses about whether or not it's gross.
Well, we're talking about inside of. We're obviously clearly talking about what's inside. We're talking about a pregnancy. We're not everything you're talking about. Everything that you talked about was post-pregnancy.
Why is pregnancy the defining characteristic that makes someone human now? Because you've yet to define what the only thing you've said thus far. Listen. I'll let you finish, but let me just say, thus far, the only argument that you've presented as to why I'm wrong is that in order for a human to be a human, they need a body. I have utterly decimated upon multiple counts why that is not the principal element of what makes an individual a human. And so I need something more from you, because if we keep just going in circles about the body, I'm going to just keep destroying that argument as to why that's not a principal element of humanness that like defines it, that is an all-encompassing definition of what human is.
Well, I think we're talking about is pregnancies, and we're talking about what's on the line, Scott. Let me tell you right now, what's on the line is violence against women. We're talking about aggressive policies against women. That's what's on the line right now. Women who are pregnant. Right? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about a system, right, that removes resources. We can provide these resources to have a safe medical procedure, but we're deciding not to do that. We're deciding if, women want to have it, if do have some sort of type of abortion, they get punished, legally put in jail. I don't know how, even as from your perspective, how you're going to allow that to happen. If you want to talk things post-pregnancy, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about abortion, which is pivoting. A medical stopping of a. No, I always was talking about.
You've pivoted completely away about what a human is, and now you're trying to pull on the heartstrings of aggression. And I would simply say to that entire thing. I would simply say to that. I would simply say to that, right, that a woman who commits an act of abortion is a murderer. That's the aggression. They have murdered something. They've murdered a human. Now, how as a society we want to deal with that, given our current legal system or given an anarchist legal system, right, is totally something we can talk about in terms of what is the least aggressive way to handle, and what's the most effective way, and how do we do these things? But that's the act of aggression. The initiator of violence is the woman that goes into a doctor's office and the doctors and nurses that commit this act of murder. Those are the aggressors, right? Anything else that's done after that, right, from Aesop's principle, right, they're a murderer and they cannot pay restitution, and therefore they cannot argue that they themselves shouldn't be murdered if there is family of the femaless fetus that wants justice. Do I think that's what we should do, right? No, I don't think that's what we should morally do. But at the end of the day, they have no leg to stand on in terms of their imprisonment if they murder a human. No different than if I walked outside with a gun and killed a human being and blew their brains out. I don't really have a justification. I can't morally justify that, like, against the non-aggression principle, because I've committed a criminal act of which I cannot fully pay for. At this point, it's up to the family of the individual that I've murdered to negotiate what it is that they want done with me, be it my murder and recompense, be it me working as a slave for them to pay off my debts that we maybe like contractually agree to in some regard, whatever that may be. That's a post-secondary effect to the initial violation, which is the murder of a human being.
A baby that you talked about, a child, a woman, and a veteran are not a fetus. They're not involved with the pregnancy. So any arguments you think that you're destroying me with, they're irrelevant. You're just irrelevant. The only thing you gave the status of a fetus of being a human being is it has DNA. Like humans have a lot of different things, DNA being one of them, life having one of them. But organisms do a thing. They don't just have a thing.
That's not my definition of what
metabolize. Well, that was your main definition of being a human. Humanness was having a DNA. That's how you identified you're killing a human being. How do we know we're killing a human being?
That's not my definition.
Okay.
That's not my definition of what a human is, right? Like, if I had to define what a human is, I think we would be here all night, and I don't know that I would ever get a perfect definition.
I think what you're going to talk about is not going to be anything related to a pregnancy, though.
Right, but what I said is that they belong to the cluster that is human. They are identifiable as something that is human. But humans are a vast array of differences and personalities, and they share many things in common, and there are a lot of things that are different. So I mean, finding a perfect definition of human, I think, is a task left to greater minds than you or I, right?
Well, actually, I think
what I'm simply saying is that they belong to that category, and we can very easily tell that they belong to that category because they are a human life with distinct human DNA that no other human on Earth has, right? And that puts them in the category of human.
DNA is like a blueprint. If you're building Legos, it would be like I have the manual. I have the manual, and I have the desire to build a structure. But there's nothing there yet. There is no. You have no Legos. You don't have the build yet. So what I'm saying is, like, basically, until you have a build, you don't have a human being. And I know you just said, Scott, that human beings do things. They live, they love, right? They work, they play. All that requires a human body. That I'm basing that in, anatomy and physiology. That's all things that we can behave, the ways that we can have, the way all our feelings are attached to a human body. And I'm using medical imaging. I'm saying if you look inside the, inside the uterus, a field of anatomy and physiology, which is embryology, would say that all those systems that exist with the human body aren't present yet. And if you want to talk about, when we should, how far we should allow, pregnancy, that's a different conversation. But initially, I'm saying that your definition of a human being is flawed. So you have given a partial definition of what life is. I would say an insignificant amount, and you don't include any anatomy and physiology.
Yeah, that's not what we're doing, right? What I'm doing is I'm saying that I'm doing a simple. I'm saying there is a cluster, right, and that this cluster includes all types of differences, right? And this cluster is called human, and we can identify a zygote as belonging to this cluster because it has distinct human DNA and that it is a living organism. That is all that is necessary. One does not need to have and you say, well, you're not adding anatomy and physiology, but that's hinging upon your argument that the principal element that makes a human is some form of arbitrary line. I'm not sure what. Development of the human line. Well, it's arbitrary in that you're choosing a line that says this is the stage of development, right? Because our brains aren't arbitrary. Our brains aren't fully. Our brains aren't fully developed until 24 for females and 26 for males. Does that mean that a 20-year-old male is not a human? They're not fully developed.
Look. We go through stages of development. There is no doubt.
Right.
When we were children, we have different levels of consciousness that we would at 26. My children, they're not old people, right? They're children. We can identify that there's, distinct, observable differences. There's a lot of work that's been done into that. I'm saying that when you look at a pregnancy, if you look inside a pregnancy, if they're not it's not a child there. I mean, obviously it's not a child. It's not outside the womb, right? If we look further, if we look deeper with tools that are beyond but if you're saying it's on DNA, I'm saying that the body, there is no life to be lived if you can't move in this world. Moving in this world, regardless of how you feel about it, regardless of your DNA, any organism has DNA. But to be human, we have a certain build, a human build. We have certain
which is
things that make us up. We have functions and structures, and if you don't have those functions and structures, there is no living like a human. That's just
we're going
logical.
In circles.
You're losing it. You're losing it though. That's why
I'm not losing it. We're going in circles. No, I'm not missing the narrative. Like your narrative is that there's a certain stage of development, right, where you don't have past the primal, where you're past the primal streak, where you have fingers and toes, where you have a heartbeat, whatever that arbitrary line is that you're drawing that you've yet to define, right? That is definitionally. Where's that line? I haven't heard you.
Where you have a body, when you have systems in place that can fight off entropy, where you can fight decay. I know when you're a little baby, you need people to help you because you can't go out and hunt, but that's obligations as a parent. So you still have a body. You still have a body that functions when it's helped out. And there's stages where you have, you need a brain. That makes no sense, right? Well, no, because you need metabolism. If you want to discuss all the different systems that we have, like metabolism doesn't happen.
It's very simple. It's metabolism. Very simple why your definition, your arbitrary line doesn't make sense, right? Because you said that it can fight off entropy, right?
Right.
And presumably you mean unassisted, right? Would you mean unassisted or assisted?
No, because we're humans. We're not bacteria. We're not bacteria, right? We're not bacteria, and we're mammals, right? We're a specific kind of.
Would you agree
creature.
that the principal elements of what it means to be human change as technology changes because viability outside of the womb changes?
I would say that, yes, but
Okay.
I would say that, well, I'm talking about our timeline. I'm not talking about, historical timeline where they thought, they're just like the Ant-Man and we just grew up, grew like a person just grew, right? This is our era. We have medical imaging that tells us what's going inside the uterus, right? We have, we think about, people going through stages of development, right? We're doing that. And I would say,
doesn't make
like,
any sense. You're saying that a human, the principal element of a human is that it has a body that is capable of fighting off entropy, right? Yeah, and again, these are incoherent, right? Because like a person with cancer, right? If their body is no longer able to fight off the cancer, is now no longer a human. Like your definitions don't work. Your definitions have all of these exceptions to them.
You already talked about someone that was already human. You just talked about a modified human, a sick human, a diseased human. They were already born.
Say that they were already personhood at a certain stage of development.
Okay, so if you want to talk about personhood, a personhood is something that belongs to a human being, right? Mm-hmm. And what that is like kind of the aspirations, the goal, like the social goals that we have for a human being. Like, I want you to be strong. I want you to be healthy. I want you to be whatever, a warrior. Those are aspirations that we put on human beings because we want to think about their future selves and how they develop, because that's what, as society, as we do, we play roles in people's development. So that's what personhood belongs to. It belongs into a moral system.
Okay. Can you explain that? No, like what you said isn't making sense to me, and that might just be the way that you said it, or it might be me misunderstanding. So you're saying
no, Nick, please.
A human. So I don't know if you're abandoning the previous definition or adding to it. I would just assume you're adding to it, which is that human is one that has a body that is capable of fighting off entropy, or has developed at least to a certain point at one point in time, that has a body that is capable of and can do so assisted, so it changes with technology what is and isn't a human. And then you're saying, but also other people ascribe values to this body, and that makes it human.
No, that makes it a person. No, that makes it a person. We were talking about personhood. There's a difference between.
Have you ever known a pregnant person? You ever lived with a pregnant woman? You have children?
I'm saying that you have a human body is a descriptive term from biology. I'm using like that as a like it has structures and functions. A human being. I heard that you were in sociology. That's the way we behave, the things that we do, the ways that we interact. That's the life that we live. Personhood is the things that we ascribe, that if they live in some culture, if they live in some family, those are the aspirations that they want for that human being, the life they want that person to live.
I have to be missing something. I have to be missing something, because if that was the case, then you would give personhood the moment a female finds out she's pregnant and has aspirations for her child. Because every woman that gets pregnant intentionally and wants a child has aspirations for their child, as does the father, and as does like if you just go to the mall and you're showing, right? Like, people ascribe aspirations for the children of the future. And also this is done to things that don't exist.
And let me tell you, this is why I said I was coming from a linguistic perspective as well. Because what we're doing, this is true. And I don't want to diminish like people's emotions. Like, it's colloquially is fine. Like, that's my baby. I can't wait to see my baby. I want to hug my baby. But they're terms of endearment. They're not actual. It's not a factual statement that, extends into an observable world. It's a matter of like, I want my baby. I care about, raising my children well. Why would I use that? I don't need to talk in a biological, from a modality of biology, right? I can just talk as a person to my wife. Like, I love my baby that's going to grow. That's fine. That's a linguistic issue. It's not a scientific one. We're not coming from a modality of medical imaging. We're using a modality of linguistics at that point in time, and that's the problem with a lot of the discussion around abortion, is that we're sloppy bitches when it comes to words, right? But when I'm saying, like, what's on the table is violence and aggression, and there's a time to tighten that all up and really be objective and see, check our cognitive biases to see when we're placing these kind of prescriptions on things, right? I'm saying what's happening is that we didn't do that. We just allowed our sloppy bitch nature, which, hey, whatever, right? But this is where we're at. and it's hard to see the distinctions. And I'm trying to lay out the idea that there are distinctions to be made, and it sounds weird because maybe you haven't heard that before, but it does make sense. It's a logical, it's a rational perspective, I think. And I'm just trying to lay that out to you.
You deny property clusters as a means of defining terms, right? You say that
property terms can be defined by the modality used, right?
Okay. Again, you're denying that a human, right? You can do like an analysis of a property cluster as a means of defining humanity. And so you're now challenged with defining what a human is. And the essential element of humanity, you've given two definitions. One is a body that is capable of fighting off entropy assisted. And the second is that you didn't actually define a human this way. You defined personhood, separating human and personhood as any agent that is given outside aspirations by other people. Neither of these definitions work at all. And we've kind of run circles around why they're kind of silly definitions. And so like, if you want to challenge why my bitch ass nature is being sloppy with my words, I need you now to like, give me a definition of human and personhood that makes sense for you to support what you think is non-aggression and I think is aggression towards a underdeveloped or less developed cluster of cells, as we'll put it, to be I'm trying to be as charitable as possible while framing this in a way that actually gets us somewhere, instead of me just keeping memeing about bodies and like memeing about personhood, like, because I'm really trying to understand your argument and it doesn't seem coherent to me thus far.
It's because you're not using the words right. I mean, I don't think I said there are different words, right? Well, let's go to your main point. I'm saying, for the sake of argument, I'm saying that you don't have to worry about a human being, a human person in the pregnancy. It's development of a human person. There's not a human person there. And so that's a main point I'm trying to get at, is that you don't need to be worried about that.
But
your main point is that it is.
Why that isn't.
I'm making
the claim that a developing fetus, zygote, or late term baby, that if a C-section was performed would just be a premature baby, right? That throughout all stages of development, that once it has distinct human identifiable DNA due to a Bayesian analysis, it belongs to the cluster that is human. You say that that's ridiculous because it doesn't have a fully developed body yet. And then I say, well, that doesn't actually go against the property cluster. What you're actually arguing is that there is a distinct human trait that is lacking in fetuses and in the zygote, right? That develops at a certain point of time. Your answer is the ability to fight off entropy, right? Which your answer is essentially viability outside of the womb, right? But maybe a little bit later, because viability just means 50%, and you didn't like draw a hard line, but that's kind of what we're talking about, right? In a roundabout way. And so what I am simply saying is I've attacked that position pretty doggedly, right? In terms of why that doesn't make sense. So what is it about the developmental stages that make this thing not a human because of that, but doesn't apply to everyone else that doesn't fit that definition? Why is it that they at a previous time had to develop, like what's the defining characteristic here? And also, if that is the only part of the definition of humanity, right, then why are dogs not humans? Why are cats not humans? Why are bacteria not humans? Why are, any other species that fits the definition of having a body that is able to fight off entropy not a human? You come to saying like you keep saying we need to be really precise about organisms.
All organisms have that capacity to fight off entropy. That's kind of the thing that living organisms do, period. That's just a living organism thing. And you know why we're not dogs, because we have a structure. We have we have human bodies, right? So I don't know why you would say that we're like dogs. I'm
not saying that. What I'm saying is that when your definitions of humanity, right, do not
don't say humanity. I never use the word humanity. That's not
human. Your definition, it's an incomplete definition of human if you're positing a definition. If that definition leaves out people that we know are human and also includes things that we know are not human. So it's a bad definition.
You confused. Can you say that again? That's really confusing. I'm not sure.
Your definition about your definition about the ability to fight off entropy was a definition that you gave about what human is, right? It was a definition that you gave for human. I'm saying it's an incomplete definition that's incoherent because it includes things that aren't humans that we can kind of just which you just admitted, like dogs, right, etc. And also because of the body analogies includes things that excludes things that are humans, which is humans that have the incapacity to fight off entropy.
I understand, Scott. So the point. So there's stages right here. So there's a generalities going on. So living organisms can fight off entropy, right? That's one point.
Okay.
Human beings, right, have functions and structures to do anything that is as a human being would do. To live a life like a human being, you have the human body. That's a different argument. It's a different point made.
Yeah, but my argument.
So I'm saying the properties.
You're missing a principal element, right? Because my argument is that both dying organisms can still be humans, and that developing organisms can be humans because they are distinct biological entities that have human distinct DNA in them. And so thus both of them fall in the category of human.
So you kind of sud yourself up a little bit here, Scott. I want to listen to this. Is a fetus, is a zygote a living organism?
It's a developing organism. It's
I'm asking, that's not the question. That's the question is it a living organism?
I mean, if we were to use a strict biological definition, I'm sure there would find things that would state that it's not living per se.
It's not.
It doesn't matter. It's a human.
Oh, it does. Well, you're just saying that, but it's not living organisms. Humans are living I mean, we can go down the logic tree on that one, right? Human beings are living organisms, right?
Human beings are living organisms, sure.
Right.
But
so zygotes, embryos, not living organisms.
If a zygote is not defined by biology as a living organism, then human beings are both a living organism and a developing, not quite living organism by those definitions.
No, I would say a human being is a living organism that also has a human, a structure, a human body. And we behave certain ways. Our body allows us to do that.
Again, the body
it seems so obvious. Not really, because
it's kind of already been shown to not be.
Well, that's the set of things necessary to be human. Like it's a necessary component. It's necessary and sufficient. It has all the. Okay. You have to have that. It's not an option. It's not arbitrary either. It's not arbitrary.
You have an independent organism, right? That some biology might define as not a living organism because it is still attached to the mother and feeding and dependent upon the mother, right? So what happens when the biological definition is something in order to be a living organism must be post-birth, right? You see the issue there is, my issue there is, like, if you're trying to use definitions as a means of a gotcha, whether or not something is distinctly human and belongs to the human category and deserving of the rights of personhood, the definition is kind of irrelevant of living organism there. Then we're really just playing semantics with words that can be changed. The principal element here,
so Scott,
the principal element is that it belongs to the property cluster human, that it is a distinct entity with human DNA, and thus it has a right to its body, and that right cannot be violated because it has a right of personhood and self-ownership.
Your definition doesn't make sense when there's no body there. You just said it.
There is
a right to a body.
Okay, well now define
based on what? Based on what?
Define a body.
Well, in humans, we have functions and functions and
Define
structures.
body. Don't just say
There are different
functions and
systems.
structures. You're trying to
Well, we have-
obfuscate
well,
the
no,
fact
no,
that
there's
body
different-
means a lot of different things.
Well, not in a Kantian sense of just occupying space and time. In an actual, I'm saying I'm basing my definition on medical imaging, right, and on anatomy and physiology. If you want to go over every system and function, we have like a skeleton,
I don't
nervous
no, I
system,
don't care.
the endocrine system,
that's irrelevant.
hearts, lungs, and they
That's
all work
irrelevant.
together.
That's irrelevant.
Why is that?
Because
It's not
an
irrelevant
octopus-
because you can't do any of
because an
that. You can't be a
octopus-
human without it.
An octopus has 3 hearts, okay? That doesn't mean that humans don't have a body because an octopus has 3 hearts, right? Like, what is the definition of a body? You say it has systems, okay?
No, we're a living organism, right?
So does a zygote.
One thing's true.
Zygote has systems. It has a
doesn't,
cellular
right?
structure.
It
has
doesn't
DNA.
have systems,
it has
dude.
RNA.
It doesn't.
It has a nucleus.
doesn't.
It has different portions of cell structures that are systems
It
that
doesn't
work
have-
independent and interdependently.
It doesn't have human systems yet. It's developing to that stage. It hasn't reached that stage of development. I don't know why you would say that.
Okay, so if I have Crohn's
I mean, it's
disease,
kind of obvious, right?
If I have Crohn's disease,
You're already a person,
right,
so what are you talking
and
about?
I have portions of my systems, right, removed from me, and now I have a colostomy bag because I no longer have large intestine, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make me not a human. That just makes me a human that has a colostomy bag.
You are a human. You had body parts that were damaged, and you removed them. That's a process. There's a process that happened there, and there's a process of developing into a human. Right?
Do you not see that
you're way outside
no.
but you're outside the womb, dude. You're not even talking about a pregnancy anymore, right? You're talking about illness and
right.
what requires
I'm
for a
proving
human
that your
to still
definition is
remaining
incoherent, right? Because
well, you're talking about human.
Your definition is not the ownership of a body. Your definition is the body must be developed, and then it earns rights once it develops a body, and those rights can never be taken away, even if that body is gone or is deteriorating, right? And so what you're really saying is that I define a human in such a way that allows me to justify abortion. You're not actually making an argument that defines the distinctness of humans. You're not talking about the clusters of what humans are and aren't. Instead, what you're doing is you're attempting to use science, and you're attempting to use information that you have about the developmental stages of humans, and then use that as a means of excluding them so that you can justify a right to murder. And I don't agree with that.
So now we can talk about personhood. I set down the conditions, and I think you sometimes got it right, of the conditions of being human. And now we can talk about killing. We can talk about when we might not want to be involved with abortions.
Well, that's what we've been talking about this whole time, is killing and murder.
No, because what happens is in those discussions about personhood is you front load the most pivotal important piece to your argument up front. And I said I'm noticing it. It's not a good definition. A DNA, one piece of DNA is not any behavior that a human has. There's a lot of other things that include life. So I'm given you a set of things that a human being has to include. You have not given me that. You have just the cart before the horse and said that it's just a person, DNA, moving on now, and then talking about veterans and people losing their intestines, right? I mean, we've already established we can already establish those are humans.
No, this is a lie. You're saying that you've given me things that a human must have, right? And that I haven't done that. I have given you that, which is an organism that has distinct human DNA. And then the things that you've posited, I have been able to show how they're inconsistent. And so that it's not actually the body that is the definition of the human. And instead, your definition is a certain arbitrary line of measurement in the developmental cycle. And my question is how is it that something can be an organism that fits in the property cluster of human, but because it hasn't developed enough to achieve certain arbitrary things that you have defined, it is thus not a human? And you have been pivoting around this, and you're getting upset that I'm using examples to show why this is inconsistent, and that the claim that it is the ownership of said body is false, but instead the actual developmental stages?
I think I've mostly gotten what I've got because I don't really want to go into what an organism is and show you like the different, components or explain to you, give an explicit example of what an organism
Right,
has.
because it doesn't hinge
Because
on
we
my
haven't talked-
argument.
Well, because you just implied that you just said it was an organism. Like, where do you mean? What are you talking about, dude? You just said like, well, it's clearly DNA with an organism. You just said that. What are you talking about? I'm saying an organism. No, an organism has different things besides DNA. You do know that, right?
I'm
And as
well
a living
aware.
organism, right?
But are you going to continue? Are you going to continue to avoid and pivot, or are you and just trying to attack the word organism and just attack scientific definitions? Or are you going to actually deal with the philosophy? Because you came in here and you said, "I'm a philosopher," and now what you're doing is playing semantics with definitions to avoid the philosophical argument.
You front load your whole philosophical argument with a definition that's inaccurate, and so that's definitely in your type of reasoning. Definitions are extremely important because you don't depend on observations, right? You don't care. You don't care. You didn't care about what an organism is. Why don't you list to me what things an organism has, and we can discuss what a zygote has. You're just saying stuff, right? You're not pointing to observations because you don't care. You don't care about medical imaging. You don't care about.
Yeah, I don't.
I don't care about the stages. I know. So if you want to talk about semantics, that's your whole gig.
It's scientism bullshit to avoid the philosophy. So please don't call yourself a philosopher.
You don't have any
yourself
ethics.
a consequentialist that's using science to try and justify the murder of humans. Because that's all I've seen.
There's no person there. There's no person there, other than you just uttering a word. I would say that's almost like what they call it, a modal fictionalism. You just have a word you're using to fit your logical proposition. And I'm saying,
I'm not. I'm saying that
you are because you don't care about what
kill some. You cannot do an act of aggression against someone that is a person, right? And you're saying I'm using a modal what do you say, modal fictionism as a means of doing that because my definitions aren't correct, right? And now what you're using is science, right? And attempting to use empirical data to define humanity, and you're wishing around. Yes, you are. Humanity as okay. If we're talking about the individual human, and then we're having a meta conversation, then we're obviously talking about humanity. You're trying to be slippery with words, and you've yet to put up an argument that's coherent. Okay. I agree. What you've done is you've attempted to attack, my positions and my definitions, and at a certain point, I'm bored of that.
Done.
Right?
You're done. I got you. Hey, Scott.
I can only go in circles so many times.
I get it. Actually, because I'm just saying that you front load your argument with that. It's so important to your discussion. It is. I know that. It's a conversation stopper because I know you can't. Your whole thing hinges upon that. Your whole moral system depends on that being a person. I get it. It's a hard discussion. I thank you for
it does not hinge upon the definition of organism. I could simply just say
it doesn't. Not organism. Just saying that it's a person. It depends on that.
Playing semantics around the term organism is
I agree.
You just easily say entity and avoid the entire problem here of dealing with whatever definition biologists are using that has other philosophical frameworks.
You don't like observations. I was trying to say that my whole thing was anchored in.
I'm saying that I don't like observations. So
my argument for abortion, right?
Okay, go
is
ahead.
one of health and safety. Actually, that's actually my main point. My main argument is that the time that we're in, we have politics have already been done, where there is a line that's been made. On one side, you have women who want safe medical abortions, right? They want access to a safe medical procedure, and you have I'm an ally to them. They were like, green light, I want that. And
relatively safe. As safe as can be.
It's a moral statement to say medicine's safe. It's an ethical, it's been agreed upon already. We might have arguments about it, but it's been agreed.
They want free, unregulated access to the best technology that they can afford.
That's right.
In order to get it done in the safest way possible. I just want to say it's like an abortion and pregnancy both have dangers, but continue.
I totally agree. I'm saying that there's politics done before us, right? And those have said that the type of medicine that abortion is safe, and that they wanted to allow it. They wanted to allow some resources to allow people to have that. I'm I'm seeing women that are pregnant. They're like, green light, I want that, right? I'm an ally to that. I have my own box of beliefs that support that position. I'm saying on the other side, we have a side that's denying them access to that. Not only that, but punishing them if they do that. I would say that as a form of violence, economic violence, when you're not allowing access to resources that where a person could otherwise lead their best possible lives. It's my position that women, given optimal abilities to understand what's going on, will make the best choices for themselves, their families, and their communities. From now into the future. So I believe that to be true. I am an ally to women, and right now I am saying that people that are against abortions, right, and not say they don't want them to have any access. I think it's a type of economic violence, which I'm not okay with at all. And I'm saying, like, when it comes to like punishing, like put them in jail or fining them, is like absurd levels of behavior. One that I would not. I don't know how anyone could accept if they lived in. If you're in a group of people, you would expect not to be hurt, right? You would expect to, hopefully, ideally live your best possible lives. And I'm saying that goes against that whole notion. That's my moral.
I do think it is a form of violence. I have no problem with violence, right? Like if someone breaks into my home, right, and they're a thief in the night, right, and I wake up and I grab my gun and shoot them, there's nothing morally wrong with that, right? It's justified violence. Just like locking women in jail for abortions is actually justified violence because you're dealing with a murderer. That's the issue. The issue is not about safe access, etc. Right.
I think it's not a good definition, and I'm saying one that's not.
Why is it? Why is it not a good definition of murderer?
Because there's no person there.
Right. So again, right. So your definition of personhood is I don't even want to go there again because your definition of personhood gives personhood to like dogs and like machines and everything, right? Which would defeat your own argument. So
it actually would not. It actually say that you can have aspirations for your dogs. Like if you have a pet, you have aspirations to believe it to be a living a certain life.
It's not a person, but it has personhood.
Not human personhood. Well, you can have. There's human personhood, which is we ascribe to. You're obligated to act, certain ways. You have certain like responsibilities, legal like responsibilities, and you have certain entitlements. That's what happens when you're talking about humans and that type of personhood within a legal perspective. When it comes to like personhood to a dog, I mean that depends on you, right? But you still to say that you don't have like aspirations for some sort of animal. I mean that does seem to be the case when it comes to things that you love, but you can love.
Yeah, I just like, I could try and deal with that. Let's just move on and assume that when I say personhood, I'm talking about an individual that has the right to self-ownership. That is what I'm saying. Not that personhood is the ascribing of values to a thing, and then that there's a distinct human personhood that's attached to rights and responsibilities, etc.
That is the case, though. That's a legal fact.
I would just simply say that I don't accept that definition. That you're talking about something else.
It's
not a matter of don't understand it. It's just that's not what I'm talking about when I say personhood. I'm talking about someone that has the right of self-ownership, right? I would deny that any human has responsibilities to others other than those that they contractually agree to.
But you could imagine a world where we would want to have responsibilities, though, right?
I would not imagine that world. I can imagine that you might want that world, but I don't believe in positive rights. So I don't believe that anybody should be obligated in any fashion to do anything for anyone. That they should be free to do whatever it is that they want to do. And the only obligation that should exist are things that they voluntarily agreed to do. And, if they commit fraud or they commit some form of aggression, right? That is infringing upon other people's personhood. And that's really the only way that works, because if you believe in positive rights, you must take away negative rights. The moment that someone has an obligation, let's say, to do things for other people that they haven't voluntarily done, then you've denied them personhood by obligating that they do things against their will and infringed upon their negative rights.
Do you have we have any obligation towards future generations?
I don't think any individual person has any obligations, duties, or responsibilities other than those that they set for themselves.
Do you think systematic racism is a real thing, and that there was a result?
Question.
Well, no, because actually, what I want to refer to is New York City, where you have ghettos, where you have people in certain areas, right, where there's disinvestment in those areas, where actual like jobs are outside that area, right? So I'm saying that was a system that was developed outside of those people that lived there's choice. It was other people's choices to create an environment like that. They didn't. I mean, and then now they're living within that system. So you're saying that doesn't matter.
I take issue with the term systematic racism because it's intrinsically tied to critical race theory and critical theory, right? And so with that comes a lot of baggage. But like, do I think redlining happened? Do I think the state did that? Do I think people committed acts of aggression? Do I think like, white realtors went into neighborhoods and said, and like, bought a house and sold it to black people and then went around and said, hey, black people are moving into your neighborhood, and like took advantage of that to gain wealth and people's fears of black people? Do I think all kinds of racist shit has happened, some of which is done by the state and use the monopoly of power and violence against them? Absolutely. I just don't know that I just don't know that I am willing to adopt a term that's so deeply embedded in Marxist ideology.
But it almost seems like you wouldn't care, because if those people in past generations were just doing what was in their best interest, and they had no obligations towards future generations, it doesn't really matter if they did scorched earth tactics, though, right?
I'm against aggression. I'm against the infringement of other people's negative rights. I'm saying they don't have obligations to do something for people. Right? That's different than, right? That's a positive right of other people that is infringing upon the negative rights of another person. What I'm saying is that you don't have that. That doesn't mean that you don't have, or that you have the right to infringe upon other people's negative rights, their freedom from you, right? So like, if you want to word that as like a duty or an obligation to not infringe upon other people, then like, sure, we can word it that way. But the important thing is that you don't have a right to, let's say, taxation, right? Like taxation is theft and violence against people. You don't have a right to utilize some form of violence against other people unless they are a criminal in some fashion that has, showed that has showed a willingness already. They're the initiator of that aggression, right? And so you're protecting that person from that aggression, and then instituting some process for restitution for the crimes that they have committed, so that they can continue to not be a criminal.
Scott, I enjoyed talking to you. I think this has gone off a different topic, which I'd actually like to talk to you if you'd like to talk again. If you talked about taxation, rights. I won't be so doggedly adamant on the definition thing. I just knew I'll tell you, that was my purpose coming here, because I knew that was something I had problems with, and I want to see how a smart person of your nature would deal with that. And I thank you for your time, though. I think you did. You did me a favor. I appreciate it.
Of course.
But if you'd like to talk about those kind of policies and positive negative rights, so I can tell you my perspective, and I think we can have a good discussion. Maybe look. I don't talk online that much. I just, thanks for the experience and for your time.
Yeah, of course. And stick around in the Discord, and plenty of people will be willing to scream at you.
All right, buddy. You take care.
All right. You have a good one. You just watched a clip from our Twitch channel, Fabian Liberty. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a follow on twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty.